So insofar as you can talk about the intelligence you were looking at, we've been hearing that there was basically no way that the IC could have known that the Afghan military will dissolve so quickly and that Kabul could fall so quickly. And
yeah. I could not disagree more with what Chairman Milley is currently putting out there with Secretary Austin, the head of DOD, that they could not have known that the Taliban would take over in such a quick manner. Rewinding the calendar back to when we were running President Trump's withdrawal plan, as I said, it was a conditions-based withdrawal plan. Those conditions were based on the intelligence we were collecting on the ground in Afghanistan, day in and day out, for a long period of time, because Afghanistan had been a priority national security interest, thus a priority collection interest for the U.S. government writ large under President Trump. So we, and this would be a combination of the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of State, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and myself would go in and brief President Trump and his national security team on the situation. And we didn't just do it one-off, we did it constantly to bring him the latest intelligence, not just through the presidential daily briefing, but operationally as well from the DOD perspective. So he, as the commander-in-chief, could make an intelligence-based decision on our withdrawal process. And we told him, based on the intelligence, without getting into the details of it, that our assessment was that if we surrendered in Afghanistan, that is, if we just up and left, the Taliban would take over almost immediately. And he came to his own assessment that it would likely happen in a couple of days. That was the commander-in-chief's assessment based on the information and intelligence he was being briefed by his national security team. And he was correct. We agreed with that, which is why we said we could not just up and leave. It would implode catastrophically if we just surrendered our position in Afghanistan, which is what you see now. But President Trump knew that, and that's why he issued his conditions-based withdrawal. And that's why I disagree wholeheartedly with people like Milley, who was the chairman then and is still the chairman. And I also disagree with Secretary Lloyd Austin for taking the same position, because he has access to that intelligence. It's not like we deleted all that intelligence when we transitioned. We provided them with all those briefings, all that material. It's still there. They just didn't bother to look at it. And what they wanted to do when they came in, as President Biden immediately came in and said, I am not going to abide by the 1 May withdrawal date that President Trump had put in. And what did that do? That caused the Taliban to immediately say, we've been negotiating in good faith with the Afghan government and the U.S., and you, the new commander-in-chief, are saying, I'm breaking those good faith negotiations. So the Taliban said, we're done negotiating, and we're not going to abide by anything we agreed to as well. And unfortunately, the Taliban, once we surrendered under Biden in Afghanistan, immediately came to power in days. So, you know, this was one of those situations where I wish President Trump was wrong, because if President Biden was right and it would have taken the Taliban years to retake Afghanistan, we would not be in this situation, in this tragic situation, with thousands of Americans stranded in Afghanistan, and we can get to that. But President Trump was right, and Afghanistan imploded, and it only took a matter of days. And this national security team under President Biden knew that, and is not being honest with the American people when they say they have no idea that it could have happened so quickly.
Okay. So you said something earlier that I just want to touch on briefly, and it sounded like you said that you feel like the administration might be taking policy points from the media?
Yeah.
Did I understand that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's no surprise that the mainstream media would attack President Trump for any national security action he took. I remember when I was running counterterrorism for him and we eliminated Baghdadi and later Soleimani. There were actually headlines in the mainstream media that criticized us for doing it. And President Biden came out publicly and said he was against the Baghdadi raid that killed the #1 terrorist on planet Earth. So no matter what President Trump did, bringing home the highest number of hostages and detainees in U.S. history, 50-some, it didn't matter what we did on a national security perspective. The media was always taking the opposite position. And I think that carried over into this administration, the Biden administration. they convinced President Biden and his national security team that the right move was to do the opposite of whatever President Trump did, because they didn't want any affiliation with it. Because the mainstream media had taken that position day in and day out for 4+ years. And so Afghanistan is a prime example. You have a successful conditions-based withdrawal plan from Afghanistan. That's working under President Trump. And President Biden rejected it in its entirety, and his incoming transition team refused to meet with us and review that plan that was working. And now you have a media who agreed with them and told them and ran headlines repeatedly to say President Trump's plan in Afghanistan was failing, when that was a false headline. And the combination of those two things, the national security leadership of this country and the mainstream media willing to ignore the facts, leads to deadly situations like we have in Afghanistan today. So I do believe that they had a piece to play in this. And there's still individuals in the mainstream media that are praising Joe Biden's leadership in Afghanistan to this day. And I don't know how they can do that when 10,000 Americans are stranded in Afghanistan.